Hi everyone, welcome back to Juicy Conversations with Julie. As always, I am Julie, I'm your host, and we are back today with a brand new episode. Before we get into today's topics, if you like the podcast or this episode, please let me know by leaving a rating and a review, as well as following Juicy Conversations on all social media and streaming platforms. If you want to take the conversation further, those platforms are also there for you to be able to communicate with me. In the meantime, time for me to welcome my guests. So, welcome, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. Can you both start by just quickly introducing yourselves and what you do?
So, my name is Fumi Lejodu. I'm a freelance journalist, artist, and PR professional. I work in PR full-time and write articles about pop culture, the latest celebrity news, books, art, film, TV, and yeah, I just really like people-focused stories and writing and making collages as well.
I'm Jordan. I'm a TikTok content creator. I make video essays about pop culture. I'm also a music journalist. I do a lot of writing about pop culture as well, and a presenter.
Amazing. So from your intros, people listening might have guessed today we're talking about pop culture. So very broad. We're going to be going through some of the big moments of 2022, some of the biggest headlines, and then try and linking why they're so big, if there's any societal links that we can make between all of those. Probably just going to giggle and make fun of a lot of famous and rich people as well. But yeah, kind of try and bring a little bit of a moral to all of what we've seen. So I've got a list which we can kind of run through. And then if you guys have any big moments that you want to go through, I'll hand over to you guys. Did you want to start with anything, or do you want me to just throw something at you?
Give us something.
Okay. It's a tough one. I don't know if I start serious. No, do you know what? I'm going to start with the top of my list. One of my top moments was the whole Liam Payne podcast fiasco. I thought it was, not only was it funny, but it was also quite sad and concerning. It told us a lot about how far American YouTubers especially are willing to go for clout. And I think it also told us just how destructive just being famous at such a young age can be. Boys band can be, male rivalry can be. I think, yeah, a lot of it was me just like laughing and being like, oh my God, what a pick me. But then the more you look into it, the more I was like, actually, this is a bit worrying though. This does say a lot about the culture and just the world that he's been in for so long. And that, as I used to be a directioner, as a young fan, I didn't realize just like the behind the scenes of their lives, which was just a lot of rivalry, violence, apparently addiction.
I feel like he was drinking in that interview, wasn't he? Like, Jordan, did you see the full, like...
I don't think I've seen the full thing. I remember reading about it. Could you remind me what he said?
He was basically saying stuff about, like, you know, someone showed up late to an audition and, like, he squared up to them and was like, if you put those hands at me, like, you won't use them again, like, sassy, like, very, like... Yeah, he was basically trying to, like, prove that he's, like, this hard guy.
Yeah.
And of course, on TikTok, people ran with it and spliced up like him saying, "You'll never use those hands again," with some of the like cringe dance moves and stuff, like just showing that like it's a weird persona that he's trying to pull off. Alcohol in that interview as well. So like he was kind of like, saying a lot of stuff.
He also, massively dissed Zayn Malik, which wasn't great, and made like kind of domestic abuse jokes. But then he also went on to say that like he was the inception of One Direction, that the band would have never existed without him, that that basically One Direction was born from Simon Cowell promising him a career. And then obviously everybody on Twitter and TikTok looked at the stats and he's the least successful out of the 5 of them today. And so, so it was a lot of like, who do you think you are? But then I don't know, the more I was thinking about it, the more I was thinking this is just like a Britney style celebrity breakdown. And we're doing exactly what we said we were going to stop doing, which is just like make fun of him, make jokes about it, discredit any of his work, rather than just maybe asking the question of like, why was he clearly drinking that much? Why is Logan Paul? Because this was on the Logan Paul podcast, of course. It's kind of like, people missed the boat on like, everything that's worrying about that whole podcast.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that he has a pod, I don't know. Everyone is saying take the mics away from some of these men, and I do think some of the mics needs to be snatched, unfortunately.
Yeah, there needs to be jurisdictions for who can get their hands on a mic.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure as a presenter
Yeah, I
as
think
well,
it's
like
interesting.
just
I
seeing
mean,
people do crazy stuff, and you probably are just reacting internally, like what is going on.
yeah, I'm trying to think. I can't remember his exact comments. I remember something about the Zayn thing and him kind of like, yeah, this aura of him trying to be like a bad man, whatever it was. But I think you make such a good point about, you know, how we respond to people, how we respond to these kind of interviews. You know, like you said, very similar to like any other child star that's kind of been thrown into really hectic life, and then later down the line is acting weird, or like, you know, it's really easy to like come on and judge. And it's not to like excuse his comments like by any way, shape, or form, but you know, I mean, what I'm kind of getting it from like your top line explanation, it just kind of sounds like he's maybe like overcompensating, because I think like something's particular as well about being not just like a child star and thrust into like fame at a really young age, but also like a boy band in particular. Like,
Yeah.
it kind of says to me, I'm kind of getting like a masculinity thing of like, maybe it's, you know, when you've gone from dancing and singing and you're like matching outfits and, you know, all these girls are screaming for you, and like, you know, it's all very homoerotic or whatever you want to call it, whatever the criticisms would be that tend to come up with like young boy bands. But it kind of sounds like he's just kind of working double time to try and like carve a new image for himself, but doesn't sound like it's working out that well.
Yeah,
Definitely.
maybe like overcompensating a little bit. I think you're onto something there. It was just cringe, really. It was kind of like, should someone that cares about him should just grab the mic and say, let's wrap it up, Logan Paul. Let's just not do this, you know?
The publicist, the legal team, they should have just been like, that's not being, like, they would have been in the room as well. They should have said, you're not allowed to release that episode. They should have known that this could be a career-breaking moment.
Yeah. No, that was a weird one. I think just Liam in general, like, I was a directional, you know, I was a directioner as well, like Julie. Like, I was like on YouTube, like searching like One Direction funny moments. Like, I was there, like, but I think you don't really know the weird dynamics that happen between people and the actual probably like kind of traumatic rivalry between them, and like who's the favorite and stuff like that.
Yeah,
you never really think about that because you're just cutting out the poster and putting on your wall and being like, oh my god, I heart Zayn. Like, nothing. You're not thinking critically about it,
right?
Yeah. Because we can link it to like Little Mix and the whole Jessie Nelson drama, which was more of a last year thing. But obviously, when Liam Payne was so unhinged, everybody was just like, oh, he's the Jessie Nelson of One Direction. And I really am not a Jessie Nelson supporter because the blackfishing, the offensiveness, the whole like boys music video, I was just like, no, sorry, girl, not for me. But there are links to everything that you've said about like the rivalry, the not being the favorite, you know, we just roll with it. Like, we're just like, oh, this one is my favorite. This one I adore. Like, we're all young and we don't realize that to them, that is a lot of pressure. But then I think whether it's in Jessie Nelson or Liam Payne's case, both of them, I think they just can't be excused. The consequences it has on their careers, unfortunately, to me, is like, well,
yeah, no, it was just, I don't know, there were so many edits that came out of that in general. But I was trying not to indulge in like the really like dark element of like just enjoying this like slam down of Liam Payne. Like, it was like such a bad moment, like PR wise for him as well, because everyone is just like, you know, he kind of exposed himself in the most not like non-flattering way. Like, there's not, you can't put like a positive spin on that interview, really, especially if you watch the full thing. It's just like, oh god.
No, for sure. And I don't know, it kind of links to, I don't know if you guys followed the whole Gabby Hanna breakdown on TikTok as well. That was a whole moment. And we can come back to Gabby Hanna, but one of the biggest breakdowns of the year, Kanye West, which, I don't know what your thoughts are on Kanye West as a person, pre and post what he said. Personally, I stopped streaming, giving this man attention back in like, was it 2017 or something, when he said slavery was a choice.
I just felt like the way he comes out with, I think there's an academic on Twitter that I follow, Olufemi Taiwo, and he said something about how Kanye does this thing with every single breakdown, sadly due to his mental health, well, I mean, other things as well, but tied to his mental health at least. Like, he tries on different elements of an ideological clown suit. That was how it was described. So, like, he's like, okay, who can I offend? Let me attack this ideology. Let me try on this, trying on these different uniforms of hate. And the impact of that is just so terrible for him, his family, people from the same identity as him. Because I think there was a lot of, like, weird support for him as, like, oh, because he's a black man, you guys aren't supporting him, and you think that, like, he can't say things and you're trying to control him. When actually he's just spreading hate. Like, we shouldn't try and use the fact that he's from an oppressed group to say,
Absolutely.
oh, okay, he can spread hate. Like, that's not right. So that was my main issue with that, because it was like, I was seeing a lot of black men as well, sadly, which I found quite disappointing. Like, be like, yeah, Kanye, like, you go, like, they don't understand you. Like, I don't know. What do you guys think, like, about that whole thing?
I think it was it's a tricky one. I completely agree, like, with everything that you've said. I think, at the end of the day, the stuff he's saying is so outrageous and so disgraceful that, like, there is no way, shape or form to, like, excuse that. And as you said, I think it's so disappointing to sort of have it sort of be heralded and maybe, like, be excused more because of this idea of, he's a black man and he's always spoken out and he's always, like, tried to defy, like, people trying to control him. Like, that's always been his vibe. So if you don't get it, then you don't get it. You're just like, whatever. But, I just think it's never as, black and white as that. We don't have to support someone who's making comments as outrageous as he is and, like, damaging communities.
No, we don't.
But I think with, like, his recent comments, as I said, I think it's such a there's never a black and white situation. But I think this one is so interesting because, at the same time as not being able to at all excuse what he's doing or, like, deny him of, like, any sort of responsibility for the comments that he's making, I also think it's, like, a very nuanced situation because the way I see it now, as I said, with these recent comments over the last couple of weeks, it seems to be getting more and more intense, the stuff he's saying. What my main question is beyond Kanye, do you know what I mean? Been on this shit, right? So, like, we know what Kanye is, we know what he says, we know what he does. I think, like, in the last couple of weeks, with the way these comments have amped up and this hatefulness has amped up, my only question is kind of, why are we still giving him any kind of platform, right? Because, like, the people that are following him and are gonna be Kanye fans, like, they're gonna stick with him because he's been making, like, West comments for God knows how long. So some people that are supporting him are supporting him. I think for me, like, watching a man make such hateful comments that are being broadcasted on national TV, like, literally being platformed in the mainstream media, making these awful comments,
and
which will have a direct, like, effect on, like, like, that's crazy that he's even allowed. To me, the question is, like, why is he allowed a seat at that table when he's making, like, literally inspiring so much hate, right? So I think, like, I get it, and I get, obviously, people have such a right to be pissed off at Kanye, of course, but I'm like, at the same time, this is very clearly a man having a very public breakdown, very public episode, and more to the point, platforming such hateful views that are, like, now gaining steam and is encouraging these communities. Why are we still putting him on TV? Like, he said everything. We know what he has to say. Like, he said it all. Like, let's, right?
He's being used. He's being used by,
absolutely,
like, the right-wing media so much, like, which is so unfortunate because he sees himself as this, like, I don't know, some kind of, like, rebel against everyone, I guess. Like, he's kind of in the center of all these, like, tornadoes of hate and random stuff that he generates himself. And I feel like that just enables people to use him all the time for their own agendas. Because he's willing to be, oh, I'm not like the other black, voters, or I'm not like blah, blah, blah. He's always trying to just be edgy, but there's no clear, like, outcome. It's just kind of like, I'm going to say problematic stuff just for the sake of saying something that's different or something. But yeah, I just find it disappointing. But I've given up on him pretty much, a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Sadly. Because as you said, Jordan, it's like, this is nothing that's new. Obviously what he said most recently we'd started to hear people in his close circle saying that he thought those things, but we hadn't heard it out of his mouth until this year, really. But this is a man who's been oppressive, who's been violent, who's been, just very inappropriate and not worthy of having a platform for years. And you see all of these brands, and this is the case with everything. This is not just Kanye West, but all of these brands, all of these people are now turning against him. But you've been working with him for years. It's not today that you need to be like, okay, well, we're not going to work with him anymore. You should have made a stance on that years ago. And although, yes, there's an element of mental health, and again, we can probably link it to two other big topics of the year in a second, that has shown that as a society, not only do we not understand mental health, we don't know how to react to it. We don't know how to be there. We don't know we're not very aware of our own, but even less aware of other people's mental health and how to deal with it. But the main thing for me is it just doesn't excuse his behavior, and somebody needs to take the mic away and stop booking him and stop giving him a platform. Like Elon Musk reinstating him on Twitter for him to get banned again. It's just like, no, this man needs, for his own sake, but also for, at this point, a lot of marginalized communities and for their own safety, needs to be taken away from the spotlight. Somebody needs to say, okay, this stops, whether it's his team, whether it's lawyers, whether it's the media that is booking him. Somebody needs to say, okay, no, we're stopping this. This man is, one, clearly not okay and not fit to be making all these public statements. He's also now harming so many communities, including his own. Enough is enough. And I think when it comes to mental health and us not being able to react and hold the right people accountable, it perfectly links to what I was saying about Gabby Hanna, who also had what we don't know if it was real or not, but let's not assume that it was wrong just because we don't understand it. A very public breakdown on TikTok, posted over, I think, hundreds of TikToks in like a span of a week, while she was in the middle of an episode, and said a lot of offensive things, referred to herself as a woman of color, which we know that she has Middle Eastern heritage. So the problem wasn't necessarily that, but she was trying to make it as if her experience has been the same as the experience of a dark-skinned woman of color, which is very problematic. If you are white passing, you can't just come on a platform and state to be, it's harmful, because she was kind of perpetrating the stigma that women of color are this one monolith and that we all share the same experience, which is not the case. She said very transphobic things. But then again, what this thing showed us, and is the same as Kanye West, of although we need to hold her accountable for what she said, and we need to take away her platform and her ability to even make these statements so publicly, to me, it also showed that we have absolutely no idea how to deal with mental health at all, because we don't talk about it. And then the last link I want to make is the link to Britney Spears. Like Britney Spears this year, obviously, a lot of stuff happened because she's free again, but now people are speculating, she's not under her conservatorship anymore, but is she actually free? Like, people are in her comments either telling her to get help because, girl, you're not okay, when all she's doing is dancing in her living room, which we all do, we just don't post it to Instagram. Other people saying that the conservatorship should have still been in place. People, of course, you've got haters just hating, and you take a step back from the situation. And all of those three situations show us one thing is, and Liam Payne again, we have absolutely no idea how to deal with mental health. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know what to say. We don't know what to do. And a lot of the time, the only thing we can do as a society is judge and point fingers, rather than somebody somewhere saying, like, let's just not give this attention because this is not helping anyone.
I think it's a major issue as well in terms of like the distinction as well between mental health and mental illness. And the unfortunate reality is that stigmas do have an origin point, unfortunately, in society, in the sense that a lot of conditions aren't pretty, aren't cute, aren't Instagrammable, easy to deal with, or like, not everyone's mental health is a crying selfie. Some people literally spend, their family inheritance or like do like things that really put their loved ones at risk, which means that to exist in community with someone with a mental illness is something that it's a hard conversation to have because of the inherent strain or difficulty of actually that person existing in society. Even just on an individual level, it's hard for people to go through those mental illnesses. And I think that's part of the issue as well, because sometimes now it's a bit normalized to the extent where people are like, oh, mental health as a thing, it's okay not to be okay. When in reality, as society, we haven't actually graduated to the point where we actually accept people who have different needs and access needs. And, it's just very, very, very complex. But I do think in general, like the media does run on cycles of like extreme types of content. And I think that means that someone is seeing someone else's mental illness as a cash cow and like, okay, oh my God, how can we get publicity? How can we get eyes on the screen? How can we so it's monetized in a way. You've seen that with the rise of like Andrew Tate and like people like this, where like, because what they're saying is so outrageous, the right, who are like, oh, okay, maybe like extreme right people will be like, let's promote this guy. Extreme left is like, what the hell? And both of those forms of either outrage or support boost this person and propel them into fame. But it's just a whole layered, difficult one. But I don't know what you guys think about that as well. Because mental illness and health is such a big thing.
No, I totally agree. I think you're so right. It's just such a complex situation that we keep looking for very, easy answers for. And it's like, there's never going to be just a simple, there's never going to be a cut and dry case. And, even with those like examples used, like we could have another celebrity tomorrow have a breakdown that could look very, very different. And, it doesn't, there's no like one rule or like one sort of way to deal with these things. But I think you make such like a good point with, this idea of like mental health and mental illness, and we've come so far in terms of like, being open about that and talking about that and supporting each other and, talking about mental health, which we just didn't do like more than like a decade ago even. But I think you're right. I think we have so much further to go, because I think bottom line, in the way that I kind of see it, as I said, people, those examples, they've said disgraceful things and they should be held accountable for those things. But at the same time, I think, people love to act very surprised when a mentally ill person acts mentally ill, right? And I think we have this concept of, mental illness, and I keep seeing this phrase that's used a lot. And I think it's a good phrase because I understand the intent, but I think people maybe take something different from it of, mental health is a reason, but like not an excuse. And I'm like, I get it, of course. Like, I think the idea is that, you should always be, if you do something wrong, whether it's an accident or not, if you spill something, whether you do it on purpose or not, you're the person to clean it up, right? You're the person that made that mess. At the same time, it's like mental illness isn't pretty. And mental illness isn't, as you said, always just like crying selfies or just depression or just anxiety. It can take so many different forms. And I think people, as much as it's like painful to like say, and like as you said, like still harmful to those communities, and that's still a conversation that can be ongoing at the same time. At the same time, someone who's actively going through an episode and is delusional and is literally living in a different state of being is to where we are, and like believing that they're being persecuted, especially when you're a celebrity. I think that's a big thing I find really interesting with Kanye, because a lot of his stuff comes down to control, and I'm being controlled and this group of people is controlling me, and obviously that's like a very common delusion. But when you're a celebrity and you are being followed around by cameras all the time, and these media companies are making money off of you coming on their podcast and talking about this, and you are being followed, and people are out to like get your money or get your whatever it is, like it's going to feed into those delusions and like feed into those like harder. So it's not surprising that, we see those kind of delusions like take place. And I think that, it's all well and good sort of being like, take responsibility for that. And, it's not an excuse, but it's like when you see someone who's really suffering with something that's not the stuff a lot of us will just come into contact with day to day, like depression or anxiety. It's like, it can get really messy. Like, so what do we do? Do we say that, people who are going through episodes should be held accountable for the things like they well enough to, do you know what I mean?
It's just, that's why as I was writing some of this episode up and it was really relevant because Britney Spears as well, like recently there's been so much talk of like, is she actually free and all of that on TikTok. And I had a friend who messaged me about it. She was like, what do you think of how people are reacting to Britney Spears posts and stuff like that? And we had a long conversation about it. But I found, which I never expected to, but I find so many similarities between what happened to Britney Spears all these years ago, but is continuing to happen today, and what is happening to Kanye West, because we've got two completely separate situations, but two depictions of what mental illness can be like. Not, the social media idea of mental ill health that we have, not the influencer idea, which is also a reality for a lot of people, but which is like a lot of things more palatable and just has become like almost a way to sell, like talking about mental health in a certain way and only as certain things. It's become a trend, it's become an aesthetic, it's become a moneymaker. But they just go to show that there is so much that we don't know, because for a long time we just didn't talk about mental illness, mental ill health, about any of those things. We've started to talk about it, but we're literally just scratching the surface at this point. And so when these people do these things, it becomes very hard for us to know how to react. And then, it's a never ending debate, because nobody is ever going to be fully right, because some people are just like, well, what Kanye West is saying, what Kanye West is doing can't be excused by mental health, which is yes, but it's not as easy as that. And then other people are saying, well, no, but he's clearly going through an episode, so we can't really hold him accountable because he's not in control of what he's saying. And it's like, well, yes, but it's also a little bit trickier than that. And then as we're having all of those conversations and speculating on something that we don't know, we're not in his life, we don't know exactly what his diagnoses are. There's loads of elements that we don't know. We are just fueling the fire that we started as the public, of like, as we're having all of those debates, whilst these people are crying about the control and not feeling like they're in charge of their own lives, we're continuing to do that exact same thing, which is speculate, talk about it, and keep them at the center of our lives. I think is really interesting, because as three people that are very interested in pop culture, it's one thing that I find interesting is like the voyeurism within pop culture and how that has gotten so toxic. And it's just, I think with Kanye West, it's all fun and games to point the finger. And of course, as we said, we can't be giving him a platform anymore. If you want to stop contributing to his wealth, you can decide to do so. Of course, accountability needs to be held. But I think the one thing we all need to do is take a step back and be quiet and stop just talking about it and fueling that fire. And people like Piers Morgan needs to stop booking him. But then that could be a side note on its own. I think Piers Morgan's platform he shouldn't have a platform anymore either. He is the bigot of all bigots.
He's just like, the final boss. Like, I hate that man. And you know what? I think Piers Morgan, that's even like a funny thing. Because, right, he's been around for like, he's been doing his thing as Piers Morgan for like probably, I don't know, a decade maybe, below that. But like, I feel like that's such a good point. Because for me, I've always said when he was first like going on Twitter and spouting all his nonsense, like my response was always like, because I would always see people like quote tweeting or like replying and being like, Piers Morgan, or like Piers Morgan, or you know, making completely valid points because everything he says sucks. So I'm like, yeah, of course. But at the same time, coming back to that, it's like, whether you like it or not, like, essentially by you retweeting him and giving him another piece of engagement, like another putting on someone else's timeline, you're essentially like, you're giving him coin. Like, you are, that is really,
yes.
And like, his whole business model is literally just based off getting people mad, right? Like getting people upset, getting the left upset, and then getting the right to come and battle people in the comments. And then it's this whole thing. And all he's done is drop one tweet, but that's great because that's now got like 10,000 retweets of people arguing, right? So it's like, it's such a difficult one. As you said, it's such a hard thing. What do we do? Do we just stop? Do we just like pretend that we just ignore his disgusting comments and like don't engage and like don't have the conversations that like he's highlighting as someone like who is a public figure? I'm like, of course we need to like have those conversations. It's not just as simple as being like, everyone just pretend this isn't happening. We'll only ever talk about things that are nice and like, easy to deal with. But I think voyeurism, I think, is just such a good word for it. Because in general, it's like, where does that line kind of become established of like, okay, like discussing things with like a political lens or sort of having that, you know, sort of external sort of view on things, and how much of it is where it's just us loving to come online and get angry and see what that, you know, animal in the cage is doing today and how can we poke with them today. And it's just like,
literally,
it's to stop being fun. wasn't really
Yeah.
pop culture anymore. It was just everyone's a bit miserable.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think with Piers Morgan, like the same, I think I tweeted about it because I've seen so many people, including people in my circles, and I won't name them, but I really hope that they recognize themselves if they listen to this. When the whole Andrew Tate thing was happening, if you want to talk about it, please talk about it. Like, of course, we should be talking about the nonsense that he is spreading. I was so glad when he got banned from everything, but I saw so many people stitching his videos, hashtagging him, and it's just like, do you like, I knew nothing about Andrew Tate for so long. I only was introduced to his character this year, and I was talking about it with my boyfriend, and I was just like, who is this guy? And he was like, yeah, he's a horrible human being. But he was explaining to me, Andrew Tate doesn't actually have a TikTok account because he's been banned from most social media. So what's happening now is all of these fan accounts are posting all of these videos basically on his behalf. Like, he's basically paying them to. And then people are stitching them either to talk about him positively or negatively. But either way, it's benefiting him. And I've seen like a few people, that I know, do that. And I'm just like, what are you like? To me, it's like, whoever you are, if you are stitching or hashtagging him, you're just trying to get clout off of him or money off of him. But it's just like that whole model. All they do is just light the fire. And then what do? We make the situation way worse all by ourselves. It is a hard one because we can't ignore it. And it's like that with a lot of things. It's like that with like the World Cup boycott. It's like that with a lot of mechanisms of just capitalism in general, of there's only so much we can do. Like, at the end of the day, we're not the ones booking these people and making those big decisions that are then harming the planet, minorities, humans in general. We can't control those decisions being made, but we can control how big they become. So yes, sometimes you have to speak out on it. Sometimes you have to boycott. Sometimes you can't. But it's just like, Piers Morgan, Andrew Tate, these people would not be close to as big as they are if the only people talking about them was the minority of people that actually agree with what they say. And let the people who have the power of holding them accountable, which is like social media platform or journalists, for example, they can make like educated pieces, whether they choose to support these people, which is terrible. But I guess, everybody's got the right to their own opinion, or people explaining why it's so harmful what these people are saying. We need to stop just engaging and interacting with it so much. Like, Andrew Tate has made so much money this year, even though he's been canceled like 5 different times. So many people who seem to be trying to put out the fire are just making things worse. And it's just like, when do we learn? When do we learn to just not give these people exactly what they want?
100%. I think it's just like, remember, because as you said, it's so difficult, because it's like, of course, people have the right and should like have their say if someone's like spouting absolute nonsense online. Of course, like, that's discourse that needs to happen. But I think for me, it just gets to a point where it's like, if you're just jumping on just to make the same point as like 10,000 other people in the quotes, being like, oh, I hate that he said this, and it's like, okay, fine, but I feel like if you're going to jump in and say something of value, like, okay, let's break down like why what he's saying is wrong, or like, okay, like, let's jump on this tweet that's like anti-Semitic, for example, and let's like use that to like give you some links to like donate to where, do you know what I mean? Like, kind of
exactly
as a bolster to like to make positive change. But I think it's so difficult because at the end of the day, like, controversy is like the biggest moneymaker of all time. Like these Andrew Tates and Piers Morgans, they would not be getting seats. Like, they would not be getting their late night TV shows and their, their interview slots and like all the millions that they're making. They literally wouldn't. Unless like these brands know, okay, great, this is going to bring in controversy because we're going to get people watching it who love him, we're going to get people watching it who hate him, and everyone's going to be tweeting and fighting and rah, rah, rah. That's like so many more tweets than if people are just watching it, just being like, oh, that was a cool show, I agree with what he said. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like it's literally a part of the business model to make sure that we're engaging people that hate it and like want to like fight against that, and that just creates this really weird dynamic where it's like there's no real way of fighting it other than to like ignore it. Really, it's best sometimes to sort of like leaving it to just stay in their circles and not spread into like mainstream media. It's such a difficult one because then it's like, well, what do? We just sit and like don't say anything. I think it's really difficult. I think it's just a really difficult thing with social media in general. It's kind of like, how do you can't contain things in any
Absolutely, yeah. And it links back to the point about voyeurism and another big topic of the year, which I mentioned before we started recording, which would be the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial being, for some reason that I still don't understand, live streamed well, not live stream, but on TV, it became a thing where like I personally did not want to be watching the whole thing. And it started flooding my TikTok. I kept pressing not interested, not interested, not interested. Because if I want to find out about it, I'll go online and I'll read an article or I listen to a podcast talking about it. I don't need snippets of everything that's being said, because that's not, to me, it just wasn't healthy for us all to be all up in their business watching everything that was said. Like, this is a trial, this is people's real lives, we shouldn't be in there. And like, it gets to a point where you can't escape it. And that's why that business model that you describe is so powerful, because there's just some things, like same with Andrew Tate. I'm obviously not someone who engages a lot with anything that they say or is interested by anything that they say, but anytime they say something crazy, I end up I'm aware of it, I end up seeing it everywhere. And it's just that you just can't escape these things. And it's just, yeah, pop culture can be so interesting, so entertaining. I love it. I love the entertainment industry. I love everything that it englobes: music, fashion, the art behind it I really love. But we're getting to a stage where it's just scary, and it's just everybody kind of seems to just want to be up in people's businesses. And it's just like, how many celebrity breakdowns, how many viral moments do we have to see? Like even the Will Smith slap, which is like, again, like a very memeable event, but it's just like, how many times do we have to watch these things happen before we kind of understand? And I think, yeah, Amber Heard and Johnny Depp was a tipping point this year in terms of asking ourselves this question of, okay, what are we doing?
No, I mean, I completely agree. I think it's so interesting, the point you make about how you weren't even looking for this content, you were pressing not interested, and that you kept seeing snippets. I think snippets in particular, I think is like such an interesting point, because what is terrifying about that, what I find the most scary thing about that case, and the fact that it was televised, and the fact that so many people have thoughts on it and stuff, it's even less to do with like the trial itself, like even removing like Johnny and Amber, because I think at the end of the day, like obviously what happened, and you know, at the end of the day, we don't know them, we aren't the jury, we aren't, you know, the court of law. So like our like very visceral, like passionate responses to that are so like, they're placeholders to us. Do you know what I mean? They're kind of like surrogates to whatever our own like concepts and experiences are, and we kind of just use them as that. So I think like drawing back, like the fact that you're saying that you're seeing all these snippets on your without even trying to look for it, and you're someone that's like into pop culture and you enjoy dissecting pop culture and kind of look at it with that kind of critical lens. But if you're just someone that's just using TikTok, you're not really into pop culture, you know who some of the celebrities are, whatever, and you're seeing these snippets come up, and why I say snippets is like, you know, 60 seconds here of Johnny's team talking about something, and then another 60 seconds of someone else being like, okay, like I really agree with what Johnny said here, or like, oh yeah, I think it's just da 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 da. Okay, so that you can end the day and you've seen like 10 60-second clips of what would have been like, I don't know how long it went on for, but I imagine like weeks long trial, and you've seen probably like, what, let's say like 5 minutes of it, maybe like over the course of a couple of days. So like, I think that in itself, and then people's visceral like responses and arguing, and Team Johnny and Team Amber, and as if these people are just characters in a film. And it's like, at the end of the day, like we've seen such a small amount of even the trial, and we still don't know who these people are. We've definitely not been in the rooms where these incidences like have occurred, that they're like discussing in the court. Like, it's so terrifying to me that people could walk away from a situation, or walk away just from scrolling on their phone for 5 minutes, can walk away and be like, yeah, Johnny Depp is this, or Amber Heard is this, or this person's lying and this person's right. It's like, whoa, like slow down. Like, that's crazy that people have such formed opinions about something that they've been handed to by TikTok. It's not even something you've gone out and researched. Even that is like still going to be the tip of the iceberg if you were like reading articles about it. But you know, do you know what I mean? Like, just the idea of learning about a trial via TikTok, you know, I just think it's such an crazy concept.
Yeah, it was one of those moments this year where I was like, okay, social media is definitely getting out of hand here. I was like, what is going on? Because yeah, it's just, even so many people came on Twitter, TikTok, whatever, and was like, well, I've watched the whole trial. Your opinion doesn't matter. You're not the jury. You weren't in their lives. You still don't know these people. Also, it is worth pointing out that social media made it impossible to not support Johnny Depp. Like, all of the clips I saw were always justice for Johnny Depp. So even if you were trying to make an informed opinion, it was so hard. It was so hard. And it's just like, yeah, so many people just had such detailed opinions about something that we do not know about. And again, like, as you said, that's such an important point. We were treating it like it was a movie. Not only is it real people, we weren't talking about like shoplifting, you know, or like speeding tickets. We're talking about such an important, traumatizing, and serious topic, which is the topic of domestic abuse. And people were going on Twitter saying everything and nothing, like there aren't so many victims in this world that are going to be seeing what you're saying, that are going to be accessing your content. Like, we can't just come on and say, oh, I've seen this TikTok and from this is what I think. Like, we're talking about something so serious. Please, people, let's just take a step back. And the last point that I wanted to raise that you made is about saying that people were just using the trial as like placeholders for their own opinions and beliefs. It's so true. Like, I wrote an article about the whole trial, and I think one of the first sentences is like, I'm not going to be discussing the trial. I'm not going to be discussing what I think. I'm not going to be discussing who I think is innocent and is not. I'm barely going to be discussing really Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, because that's all irrelevant. That is none of my business. This is, at the end of the day, a real relationship. This is a real trial. It's not for me, little Julie, to come on and just say like, oh, well, this is what I think happened. But the article was just about how, like, the hypocrisy of us all, because obviously a lot of what we saw was, all of a sudden, the entire planet is all about, oh my God, yeah, we need to do something about domestic abuse and stuff like that. But in that same year, we've had Dr. Dre headlining the Super Bowl, even though he actually has been found guilty of assault in the 90s of a journalist, which is a story that him and his team have tried so hard to bury, but we know it happened. We know who D Barnes is. We know what you did. He's also someone who got a divorce and whose wife publicly said she was a victim of domestic abuse. He was still booked for the Super Bowl. Nobody's canceling him. Dr. Dre is getting richer and richer by the day. Nobody's talking about it. We've obviously had Chris Brown this year, who's been nominated for a Grammy, who won an AMA, who women of color have come out of their way to support him and invite people to forgive him. And it's just like, there's never any accountability. Again, Chris Brown is someone that has been found guilty and has also had a history of accusations against him, and his specific targets are women of color. And to have some of the most famous women of color and the most powerful, like Kelly Rowland, come on and be like, everybody needs to be more humble and forgive more. There is no accountability for abusers. But then the minute it's a woman, and the minute it's someone as big as Johnny Depp that is a potential victim, because one reminder is that trial was for defamation. So everybody jumping on and having opinions about who abused who, that wasn't the question. That was never the question in the trial.
Sorry to like jump in quickly, but like just on that, I think is such a good point, because like people taking these points and being like, yeah, like Amber Heard did this and like who abused who. It's like, you haven't even, you're saying all this stuff with such confidence and you don't even know what the trial is for. Like, that is terrifying.
It just shows how people will happily go on and on and on about something they know nothing about. But like, yeah, there is no accountability. And all it said to me is that it was never about domestic violence and being an advocate and being a supporter of that. It was never about that. People that are in favor of the patriarchy and that feel probably very threatened by the fact that a lot of people are trying to shake up and destroy the patriarchy saw this as the perfect opportunity to villainize women, to discredit a lot of feminist movements, to just explain that actually, no, men were never the problem. And look, females can also be perpetrators of domestic abuse and things like that. And it's just like, one, if you read a lot of feminist theory, at no point does it state like men do it all, women are perfect. That is not what it's about. Not that easy. But also it's just like, how insecure and how much do you want to just uphold the patriarchy that you will literally just speak the most nonsense. Nobody ever said like, it wasn't about like, yeah, no, Amber Heard is clearly to blame and blah, blah. Nobody ever said that abusers couldn't be women. Nobody ever said that. Mm-hmm. We are just pointing out patterns of behaviors, and it just shows the hypocrisy of it all. It's just like, the minute that people had a chance to just shake things up and discredit a lot of activists, discredit a lot of movements that are trying to free minorities, they just jumped on it. They just jumped on it without even caring. And Chris Brown happened at the perfect timing, because this was all in the same year. Like, Amber Heard and Johnny Depp's trial was what, like April, May time? The Grammys nominations came out like maybe 3 weeks ago. We're talking months between both. And it's the same people that were supporting Johnny Depp and insulting and harassing Amber Heard that are now calling for us to forgive. And, oh, if Rihanna forgave Chris Brown, why can't you? And, oh my God, is he going to have to pay for this for his whole life? And, oh my God, like, he made a little mistake. Have you guys not made mistakes? Like, first of all, I'm sorry, no. Like, hitting people and violence is not a mistake everybody makes. I've never beat up anyone in my life or like been extremely violent towards. And yes, there's mistakes that most humans will make and that you have to forgive, you know, but I'm not going to go around and say that Chris Brown's deserve forgiveness for this little hiccup that he made. Like, no, it's not adding up. You clearly know nothing about the subjects, yet you're so confident to come on social media and have these informed opinions about things that you know absolutely nothing about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a case of people having to have their say. And I think, as you said, like that exact thing of like coming back to just these people are placeholders. Like it's not even about, it's just you. Because like what you're really saying is, you know, if we can't forgive Chris Brown, what you're really worried about is someone not being able to forgive you if you were to have made the same mistake, and you can put yourself in Chris Brown's shoes, right? Like that's kind of like where you're getting at, because there's just kind of that like emotional connection, that kind of empathy you have with him. And like, you know, that's not a reason why we should forgive someone for, you know, literally having multiple charges of domestic abuse or multiple like instances against multiple ex-girlfriends of like domestic abuse. And I think like more to the point for me anyway is kind of like, you know, no one is ever, I think there's this big thing of like, you know, cancel culture and rah, 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 and people want to take away people's spotlight and stuff. I'm like, it's not always that deep, because I think like, listen, if you as you like, I think Chris Brown actually is a really good example, because something people like to say is, you know, Rihanna forgave him, so why can't you, or like why can't we, like we all need to move past because the people that have been involved have, you know, they've dealt with it. Listen, like if Rihanna's forgiven him, and I'm not gonna be mad at Rihanna and be like, wow, you shouldn't have forgiven him. That's her cross to bear. Also, it's her trauma, so like really no one else is in a position to forgive or have any kind of interjection on that. But more to the point, I'm like, listen, if you want to forgive Chris Brown and you're okay with that and you want to sit there and listen to his music, listen, I can't stop you. Like that's just your moral compass, which is gonna be different from mine because we have very different lived experiences. But I think there's this thing of like, you know, cancel culture, people canceling Chris Brown, and you know, they don't want us to forgive him and stuff. I'm like, not really. Like it's cancel culture in that instance has always existed, because the same way that 20 years ago, if you didn't like, you know, Britney's voice, and you every time she came on the radio, you'd be like, oh, I hate her songs. You just don't listen to her songs. The same way where, you know, people who don't like domestic abuse and think that Chris Brown, they've got enough evidence, they think, yeah, I don't want to support someone who does that. I'm not going to listen to his music. I'm not going to stream his music. I'm going to like be open with the fact that I don't think that I want to support him. But I think it becomes this thing of like, you either have to do this or you either have to do that, or rah, rah, rah. I'm like, listen, like the same way you have a right to forgive him, so does everyone else to like not do that.
Yeah.
Like it's really weird how you're going out of your way to defend him and he to be forgiven. No, he doesn't. No one has a right to be forgiven for anything.
Yeah.
I don't have. If I make a big fuck up, no one has to forgive me. Like I can be really sorry and I can move on, and you know, but no one has to forgive me for anything. And the same absolutely applies in a case where someone has actively been violent time and time again.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's really that thing, like people are really acting like people who choose to not support someone anymore for whatever reason are like ruining their lives. All I've done is block him off my Spotify, you know? I'm just, you know, how is this harming him? Like everybody was outraged when at the AMAs he wasn't able to perform. It's just like, he's getting his bag. Like he's about to tour. He's like releasing new music. He's nominated for a Grammy. Like, come on. His life is not ruined.
Boy, he will be fine. Like
he'll be fine.
Absolutely be fine.
And if he's not fine, it's not our fault. It's not the people who have chosen to not support him anymore whose fault it is. It's his fault. Nobody asked him to behave in the manner that he behaves. If he wants to, it's just like there's consequences at the end of the day. And that's what people don't like. They don't like the idea that your actions have consequences. And as you say, with the empathy is the people that know that sometimes they might behave in a way that there will be consequences for their actions. They're terrified of those. But it is absolute. This is what cancel culture is rooted in now when we're calling for stop supporting this person, stop giving money to this person. It's just about accountability. It's kind of like the whole Twitter debate around like freedom of speech and letting people, say what you want to say. I'm not saying you can't say what you want to say. I'm just saying if some of the things you say are too mad, yes, there's going to be consequences. Don't come crying when the sponsorships stop, when the money dries up, when people stop supporting you. Like Daniel Caesar earlier, what did he say like a few years ago? He's like, I don't make music for black people. Black people stop listening to my music. And we did. Like, it's like, and now he's crying.
Everyone did.
And he was just like so disappointed because he came out with a new project this year and it didn't do much. It's just like, you are the one that said that. So nobody's stopping you from saying these things. If you want to go and hate on a community, you know what? Go ahead. But yeah, don't then come crying when you're not making sales. Why would this community then support you? And this is the whole thing that cancel culture is rooted in. It's not about ruining lives. It's about holding people accountable and making the point that the people choosing to cancel someone or not support, it's because it's not even cancel. It's just we're choosing not to support certain people. And some people are choosing to continue to support them and look past it. That's fine. You do you. But it's just about, if somebody's career or life is affected by certain things that they've done, that is not the fault of the people that have chosen to hold them accountable. It is their fault for behaving in certain ways. It's just like, it's so many people, like, it's just, you can link it to Tory Lanez as well, who I think was literally just found guilty of, and I was just like, finally, to all of you losers saying that she was lying, why would she lie? Also with the victim blaming. But we're just holding the people accountable. I'm not going to feel bad for Tory Lanez because his career is potentially over because he's been found guilty of shooting someone. This cancel culture debate drives me up the walls.
It's so insane as well. The funny thing about it as well, I feel like, or the funniest thing I always find whenever it comes up, because it always comes up, what do you think of cancel culture and people having these platforms taken away? For me, the bottom line is like, no one is entitled to fame. Like, fame is literally not a human right. Like, fame is in itself such a fickle thing anyway, because you can be top of the charts one day, have this great, amazing hit, and then the next day there's another song, everyone's forgotten your name, and you never like have another single out again ever. And that's just, fame is such a fickle thing. It's quite like a relatively new thing, I get. Well, not even new, but the way it exists now is quite new in terms of like media and social media.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keeping up with certain celebrities and fandoms, I think is quite like a new thing in that sense. And it's like, you're not entitled to that. If you do something and then one day your same fans who are buying your albums and watching your films and giving you the check say, actually, I don't like that he did that, I'm not gonna go and watch his next film, I'm not gonna listen to his music. Like, yeah, that's always happened, and that's like always been a thing, and there is not a single person on this earth that is entitled to fame. It's not this whole thing of like, oh, you want to ruin his life and you want to take everything away from him. Like, I'm not ruining his life by him not getting to be a part of the 1% anymore. That, like, he was already extremely lucky. Like, you have to be very lucky to be in the right place at the right time to be there anyway.
Absolutely,
and it's been a very fickle thing. You could have lost it for any other reason.
Mm-hmm.
You have lost it because you've shot someone or you've beaten up someone or whatever. Like, yeah. And also, like, the whole freedom of speech thing. Like, I can say what I want. He can say what he wants. He can do what he wants. He has freedom of speech. Of course. Everyone has freedom of speech. If I went into my 9 to 5 tomorrow and said some whack shit about my boss, and I was like, yeah, but I can say what I want because, like, freedom of speech, I can still get fired. I'm not
exactly
on Twitter and be like, why is my human rights being violated? They're trying to silence me. No, you said some shit, and now obviously you're going to lose your position. Like, that is just the consequence of your action. It's always existed. That is all the cancel culture is.
I was literally about to say that. Yeah, I was literally about to make that same point about the job thing, because we are entitled to nothing. Apart from fundamental human rights, we are entitled to nothing in this world. Stop acting like these people are entitled or deserve your support. If you want to have a career, because it's a different scale of the same thing. In a way, we are these people's bosses because we are the ones paying them. So it's just like, yeah, if you do some madness, I'm not going to support you anymore. Just like any employer. Like, why would I invest my time and money into someone that is going out of their way to be physically, mentally, morally violent or abusive against either my own community or any other community? Like, why would I do that? As you said, accountability has always existed. Nobody's saying you can't say whatever you want to say. We're just saying that, yeah, certain things shouldn't be said. And if you choose to say them, fair enough, there will be consequences. That's all it is. Like, again, we could go back to the Will Smith slap.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's it's so spot on. It's so spot on. I just think fundamentally it's just like, yeah, just this idea of, people should be able to say what they want, and, someone doing something and then getting cancelled and then responding to that by being like, how dare you cancel me? It's like, what are you actually fighting for? Like, are you just fighting for people to like you? Because like, what? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, if I was out with my friend somewhere and I met someone in the circle and they said something weird, like, do you know what I mean? I'm not infringing on their human rights if I'm like, I don't like that person. Like, there's nothing. Do you know what I mean? Like, no one's gonna die. I just don't want to spend time with that person because I don't like their opinions. Like, surely if you believe in what you're saying so much, or you believe that you're right, or you believe that you're innocent, like whatever the case may be, like, stand firm in that. Because like, you know what I mean? You're not entitled for everybody to agree with you. That's never ever been the case, ever.
It's I'm sorry, but it's just massive pick me behavior. It's just, at the end of the day, it's just people trying to run free. It's just like, oh my, if you're that confident in what you're saying, roll with it. If you're not, if you're that triggered by someone calling you out, that means you know deep down what you're saying is wrong. People are just such like, it's just and the more privilege I find, the more pick me behavior. Always whining about something and, oh, how dare you take this away from me, and how dare this whole how dare you. What do you mean, how dare you? The entitlement behind it all is just, absolutely crazy.
Who are you? I don't know you. Like, like anybody that I don't want to like, I don't have to listen to anything that I don't want to listen to. Like, what next? What are we actually fighting about right now?
Absolutely. Definitely.
It's crazy.
To wrap up, do we have any good or bad, like very quick moments of the year? I know I had Renaissance down as one of mine.
Renaissance, just that album, wasn't it? Just like the album of the year. Crazy.
It's honestly,
No, love that. I'm loving seeing Flo, the girl band, just the rise of the girl band. I feel like that. I'm hoping to see more of that. I think that's really exciting. I think we're just getting poppier again, which is really
fun. Flo is just, they were on my list as well. Flo is, and they give me such big Cheetah Girls vibes, and I love the Cheetah Girls.
And I feel like, you don't get that. Like, it's been so long since we've had like a girl band that's just like pop R&B, like fun, you know?
I feel like, R&B is definitely back on. It's never been out of fashion, but I felt like we're seeing like a change in music recently. Obviously, the 2010 was very like poppy, and then electronic. We'd gone more into like what people love to describe as urban music. So everything was just more hip hop influence. All the white girls were doing it as well. Miley, Ariana, we remember those eras. But I feel like we're going back to like the old school R&B poppy vibe, which I'm really enjoying. I'm really, really enjoying it. And then, I think that was everything. I think just to finish off as well, if you have like 5 minutes, one thing I want to talk about is Matt Hancock on I'm a Celeb.
So, I mean, I did not watch it. I purposely tried to like disengage from it as much as possible. I've seen a couple clips of him on there. I mean, my feelings are still very much the same as when it was announced, which was just that the UK is not a real place. This government is not real. Nothing, like, this country is crazy. And the fact that he went on like I'm a Celebrity and everyone, he's now like the underdog of the year is the most insane. Like, that to me is the most insane thing that's happened all year. Like, I can't even wrap my head around it.
I feel like we should have started with that now that I think of it, because I watched some of it and I understand what people are saying. If sometimes he'd be on and I'd catch myself going, oh, but then I was like, no, aw. Yeah, exactly. But I was able to snap out of it. Why couldn't people snap out of it? You can feel like sympathy for someone. That's human. That's emotion. Fair enough. But you have to snap yourself out of it. Like, how is he now like a customer favorite? Like, are you kidding? I never thought it'd work. I saw it and I was like, PR move. Obviously, we know what he's trying to do with that. It was very obvious. But the fact that it worked, like, do we like him as a country now? It's just, I remember explaining it.
Because we love to do this. We love to, I don't know what it is. I think people, maybe we just love a redemption arc or something. But to me, I was just like, how is anyone watching this without just being filled with rage every time they see his face? It's like, I don't.
It's just rage and shock.
Wrap my head around it.
Yeah. Every time I saw him on TV, I was just like, I'd have a second. And then I just realized I'd be like, oh my God, this is Matt Hancock. Matt Hancock is on. And I just, I just couldn't then even watch and focus because all I could think about is he's in there. I love how he was like, oh, I just wanted to show people that I'm like a regular human. I'm sorry, but like, you are not Rihanna. I don't really care that you were like a normal human. I don't really care that you're like funny and quirky and that you like Star Wars or whatever it is that he went on and said. I don't really care, because at the end of the day, your job affects my life every day. Every day. Like you're part of my hard-earned money goes straight to you to be making the right decisions. I don't care what you do in your spare time. I don't care that you like puzzles or that you whatever. What I want to know is that you're qualified to do the job that you were elected to do. You're not. I just can't believe. I can't believe that happened.
It's like, yeah, it's like the season finale of the UK. Like at this point, I'm like, what can't happen in this country? Like every plot line, it just is happening. It's like people just throwing random words into a generator and being like, yeah, okay, this is going to be UK politics the next couple of weeks, and it just happens.
I feel like, yeah, the government, and I like to stay kind of impartial when it comes to identity politics, but I'm going to say the Tories are like, have become so comfortable with the fact that they're clowns that they're not just rolling with it. They're just like, you know what? You want to see us as clowns? We'll start acting less clowns.
It's literally their brand identity. When you think about it, it kind of makes sense, because UK humor is so absurdist that some part of me is like, maybe this is just what we love, like crazy, like politicians doing awful things, and then we're like, okay, we'll have a laugh and joke about it. And
we do, yeah. We like to be the laughing stock of the world. But anyway, so yeah, let's wrap up. Thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, and so to anyone that's listened this far, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Juicy Conversations with Julie. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Pop culture is it's never ending. There's always something to talk about. There's always something to discuss. And it says a lot about us as people. It says a lot about society. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this episode, please let me know by following the podcast, leaving a review, a rating, wherever it is that you're listening from. It really does mean a lot. If you have any questions or want to take part in any future conversations, you can contact me through social media. And I will see you very soon for another episode of Juicy Conversations with Julie. Bye.